Hi, I'm Lexi. I stopped by my pregnant sister's house just to check in. No warning, no call. And I found her in labor, on the floor, alone. No husband, no packed bag, no plan. Just her, shaking, whispering that it wasn't time yet because they told her not to make a fuss. While she screamed through contractions, her in-laws were on a wine tour, laughing, posting, toasting, family legacy. I called them. You know what her mother-in-law said? That's what hospitals are for, aren't they? But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, when I found out they had already transferred her house, rewritten custody plans, and erased her name from her own story. You ever wonder what happens when someone finally says, enough? Because I didn't mean to become the problem, I just showed up. And I didn't leave. What would you have done? I hadn't planned to stop by that morning. It was one of those restless winter days in Savannah, gray skies, the kind of chill that settled into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. I had just dropped off design samples for a client downtown and was driving through the tree-lined streets of Ardsley Park when something tugged at me. A weird feeling. Nothing dramatic, just heavy, like I needed to check on Isolde. She was due in 2 weeks. At least that's what she told me. Last time we talked, she brushed me off with that soft smile she always used when she didn't want me to worry. Said she was fine. Said Dorian had everything under control. But something in her voice had been off. Not scared exactly. Tired. I pulled into their driveway and noticed immediately how still everything was. No car, no sound. The grand White House looked picture perfect, as always, but too perfect, like a showroom. I knocked once. No answer. I tried calling, but her phone rang from inside. That's when I stopped being polite. I walked in. The sound hit me first. Not a scream, not yet, just a low, strained groan, like someone trying to keep themselves from falling apart. Isolde? I raced upstairs. And there she was, on her knees beside the bed, one hand clutched around the footboard, the other wrapped around her belly. Her face was pale, hair clinging to her temples, sweat beating down her jawline. I think it's time. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the towel off the bathroom rack, slid it under her, and helped her breathe through a contraction. My heart pounded like it was about to crack through my ribs. No sign of Dorian, no suitcase, no call placed. Just my sister, laboring alone in that perfect, curated home. Where's Dorian? I asked as I helped her ease onto the edge of the bed. She winced. Business brunch. Vera said not to make a fuss if it started early. The words didn't register. Couldn't. I pulled out my phone and called Dorian. Spanish voicemail. Again. Still voicemail. I tried Vera. She picked up. Lexi? She said brightly, wind and laughter in the background. Vera, it's Isolde. She's in labor. Now. A beat of silence. Then, well, she's not due yet. Is she sure? We're on a vineyard tour up in Habersham. Lovely day for it. She's doubled over, breathing in counts of 5. Do you think she's joking? Vera sighed. All right, call the hospital. That's what they're for, aren't they? Let us know when it's done. And then she hung up. I stared at the phone, numb. I wasn't expecting her to cry or rush over. But that was cruelty dipped in a southern accent and wrapped in pearls. I didn't say a word to Isolde, just bundled her coat around her shoulders, eased her into the back seat of my car, and drove like hell through the winding side streets toward Memorial Health. She kept whispering, Don't tell Mom and Dad. Please. Not yet. I nodded. I didn't ask why. I knew why. I pulled up to the ER, called out for help, and within seconds, 2 nurses were wheeling her inside. I parked, ran in, and filled out every form they shoved in my face. Emergency contact, me, insurance, hers, but under Dorian's name. He still hadn't called back. A nurse walked over. Are you her sister? Yes. She's in triage now. Your name's listed as primary contact. Just stay close. They'll be moving her to labor and delivery soon. I sat in that waiting chair with my fingers clenched so hard around my phone they went white. A few feet away, a couple giggled with excitement. Balloons. A pink stuffed bear. A man held his partner's hand like it was sacred. And my sister? She was upstairs, with no one but me. A nurse passed by and muttered to another, "Poor thing. Feels like half these women give birth alone these days." She didn't mean for me to hear it, but I did. And suddenly, something inside me stiffened. This wasn't some fluke. It wasn't a missed call or a bad day. This was normal. For them. A choice. Deliberate. Calculated. And if I hadn't shown up this morning, would anyone have known? Would they have cared? I got up and walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. My phone was still silent. I hovered over the contact labeled Dad, then Mom. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, I caught sight of my own reflection in the hospital's glass pane, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Not yet," I whispered. "Not like this." The hallway smelled like bleach and overcooked coffee. I stayed still for a moment, just breathing in that sterile air and watching nurses shuffle by in quiet motion. I hadn't even noticed how tight my grip had become around the hospital cup in my hand. I loosened my fingers, refocused, and turned back toward Isolde's room. She was finally asleep, or at least pretending. Her breathing was slow, her arms loosely draped around the bundled baby beside her. I tiptoed to the far side of the room where her overnight bag was stashed near the closet. The nurses had handed it to me when we were admitted, saying it was sitting by the front door. Neatly packed, no signs of panic, just ready, which made no sense. I crouched beside it, thinking maybe I'd find a phone charger or something comforting to unpack. A familiar scent from the folded clothes, lavender, probably her lotion, rose up as I reached under a sweater. And then I saw it. A brown envelope. Tucked so precisely beneath a blouse, it felt placed, not forgotten. On the front, "Personal, do not open." Of course I opened it. Inside was a folded scrap of paper, barely creased. It read, "Don't forget to bring that thing after the tour. Hide the brown envelope." No signature, no date. Just that cryptic sentence in handwriting I didn't recognize. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about the wording. It wasn't casual. It was calculated. Like this had all been timed. Planned. Managed. Tour? My chest tightened. Were they talking about the vineyard trip? The one Vera mentioned on the call? What did Dorian need to bring after? And why hide this from Isolde? I folded the note back in half, then tucked it in my coat pocket. Later, while a nurse named Maris checked Isolde's vitals, she smiled and asked, "You the sister?" I nodded. "She's got a strong baby there," she said, scribbling something on her clipboard. "Honestly, I'm glad someone's here. She's always come in alone. We just assumed she was doing this solo." I blinked. She was alone at all the appointments? Maris looked up, a little surprised. "Yeah, no partner, no mother. Sweet girl, though, never complained. Just nodded a lot." It was a strange thing to feel fury and heartbreak at the same time, like my stomach dropped and curled in on itself, trying to process what I just heard. I looked over at Isolde, still quiet in the bed. I waited until Maris left. Then I pulled the chair closer to her bedside and sat, not even knowing how to start. "Hey," I said softly. "Do you know there was a note in your bag?" Isolde's eyes fluttered open. She looked groggy, but the moment I mentioned the note, she stiffened. "No," she whispered. I didn't pack it. Dorian said he would. He said he'd handle everything. I thought it was sweet." Her voice cracked at the word sweet. She tried to sit up but winced. "I just thought maybe he was trying," she said. "Trying to step up. You know, like, finally, maybe I was being too emotional again." I leaned in closer. "Isolde, that note, it's not nothing. It's weird. It sounds like they planned for you to be alone." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "No, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't even know what's normal anymore. He handles everything. He fills out the insurance, the doctor stuff, even the pediatrician forms. He said I just needed to sign." My throat dried. I wanted to tell her how messed up that was, how wrong, but I also saw the look in her eyes. She knew. Deep down, she knew. This isn't miscommunication, I said quietly. This is control. She turned away, biting her lip. I sat back in the chair and stared at the ceiling tiles. My mind drifted to a Christmas years ago. I was 13. Isolde had just turned 18. She brought a boyfriend home, Mark or Mitch, I don't even remember now, and he never showed up to dinner after promising he would. She made excuses for him all night. Our parents told her, well, maybe don't be so demanding next time. Even then, she'd absorbed the shame for someone else's absence. Later that night, I asked her why she didn't seem more upset. Because I can't afford to be loud, she said. You can. They expect it from you. It stuck with me. I'd forgotten until just now. And suddenly, everything about today made too much sense. I was raised to stay out of things. She was raised to surrender to them. And Dorian, he was just the latest man to benefit from that. A soft cry from the bassinet broke my thoughts. Isolde stirred, reaching for her daughter. I helped her adjust the pillows. As I did, I felt the edge of the envelope in my coat pocket. I wasn't going to tell her yet, not until I knew more. I'll get you some more water, I said, reaching for the pitcher. She nodded, her eyes barely open. I stepped out into the hallway, trying to calm the fire still burning low in my chest. The corridor was quieter now, a little dimmer. I walked toward the nurse's station to refill the pitcher, my phone buzzing in my coat pocket. I pulled it out, expecting it to be a message from Mom or Dad. But it wasn't. It was Dorian. Text message. Saw you posted a story from the hospital. Please be smart, Lexi. I stood in the corridor outside Isolde's room, the glow from the overhead lights casting dull shadows on the linoleum floor. The screen on my phone still glared at me, Dorian's message sitting there like a stone in my gut. Please be smart, Lexi. As if I were the problem. As if I were the one playing games. The sheer gall of it made my jaw tighten. I didn't reply. Instead, I slid the phone back into my coat pocket and walked back into the room. Isolde had finally dozed off again, curled slightly on her side, her breathing soft and uneven. The baby, she still hadn't picked a name, was in the clear bassinet, wrapped tight, making occasional tiny noises in her sleep. I moved toward Isolde's purse near the foot of the bed, meaning only to grab her charger. But as I rummaged around, my fingers hit something thick and stiff at the bottom lining. Something that didn't feel like it belonged with her toiletries and chapstick. It was a manila envelope, no label, no seal. I paused, staring at it for a moment. Then I opened it. What I pulled out made my stomach clench. A notarized document, legal formatting, bold subheadings, signatures at the bottom. The title read, Mutual Property Transfer and Guardianship Amendment Agreement. My eyes scanned line after line, the legalese quickly unraveling into something far more sinister than I expected. This wasn't just some boring hospital authorization. This was a quiet, backdated transfer of Isolde's share of their home to both Dorian and, of course, Vera. Alongside that was language granting temporary custodial control to the father and maternal grandmother in case of medical instability or psychological unfitness postpartum. It had been signed by Isolde 2 weeks ago. I didn't realize I had sat down until I felt the edge of the hospital chair dig into the backs of my thighs. The air was suddenly too warm, too stale. I felt betrayed for her, violated on her behalf, and furious. She hadn't known. She couldn't have. She wouldn't have agreed to this in her right mind. I waited until her eyes fluttered open again before I said anything. Hey, I began gently, holding the folder like it might shatter. Did you know this was in your bag? She blinked, confused. What? I handed it to her. She read the title, then began scanning the contents. Slowly, the color drained from her face. Her hands trembled. He said it was just a medical form, she whispered. Said it was about the pediatrician needing emergency contacts. I didn't even read it. I trusted. She cut herself off. I thought, maybe he was trying. Maybe I was just being too emotional again. And there it was. That sentence, the one that so many women like her had been trained to say. had been fed through years of passive-aggressive guilt, smiles through gritted teeth, and subtle shifts of blame. I thought of all the forms I'd seen her sign without reading. The wedding catering contracts, the tax returns, even the stupid holiday gift donations labeled "from the Harringtons," when really, they were paid with her old savings. "He handles the details," she'd once told me. "I'm not good with that stuff." No. He made sure she felt like she wasn't good with it. That's not the same thing. "They've been planning this," I said, not quite a whisper. Isolde looked down at her baby, who was stirring in her sleep. "You think Vera had something to do with it?" she asked. I didn't even hesitate. Yes. The word hung between us. Final. Unapologetic. Isolde turned her face away, tears slipping silently onto her pillow. I sat there beside her, not reaching for her hand, not offering some half-hearted, "It'll be okay." Because I didn't know if it would, and honestly, she didn't need comfort right now. She needed clarity, and someone willing to fight for her without blinking. I took out my phone, laid the document flat on the tray table, and snapped high-res photos of every page. I uploaded them to a private folder in my cloud account and labeled it, "For emergency only." Just in case. The light in the room had dimmed since earlier, the pale pinks of sunset fading into navy outside the window. The hospital had settled into its nighttime hum. Quiet footsteps, distant beeping, wheels rolling over tile. I sank into the chair again and stared at the bassinet. I couldn't stop wondering what kind of life that child would inherit if no one intervened. If this pattern kept looping, the silence, the submission, the smiling through it all. A memory floated up. I hadn't thought about it in years. Christmas Eve. I was 13. Isolde was home from college with a new boyfriend. She was radiant that day, hair curled, new dress, the kind of sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen since middle school. He was supposed to meet us for dinner, never showed. Dad grunted something about flaky boys. Mom offered to warm up leftovers. I remember Isolde washing dishes alone, humming. Later I asked her, "Aren't you mad?" She looked at me like she didn't understand the question. "I can't afford to be loud," she said softly. "You can. They expect it from you." That had stayed buried deep. But it made perfect sense now. Isolde was raised to be palatable. I was raised to be quiet. Dorian didn't invent this imbalance. He simply benefited from it. I stood and poured her a fresh cup of water, setting it gently on the table beside her. She looked up with tired eyes, but offered a nod of thanks. As I sat back down, I slid the manila envelope into my own coat pocket. "Just for tonight." "I won't let them take anything else from you," I whispered, once she'd drifted back to sleep, one hand resting protectively over her baby's tiny chest. My phone buzzed again in my lap. I pulled it out, expecting maybe a text from Mom or a check-in from my office. But it wasn't that. It was from Vera. One word. Stop. By the time I left the hospital the next morning, the sun had just cleared the low rooftops lining Drayton Street, painting the city in that soft winter yellow. I had only managed a few hours of sleep, slumped in a chair beside Isolde, but I didn't feel tired. I felt sharpened, like someone had lit a fire under my skin, and I was too awake to sit still. As I waited at a red light, I glanced down at my phone. Vera's text still sat there like a splinter in my inbox. Stop. No punctuation, no explanation. Just that, as if I were a dog she'd forgotten to leash properly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because 30 minutes later, just as I returned with coffee for the nurses, I saw her. Vera. She walked through the hospital's front entrance like she was stepping into a country club brunch. Hair sculpted, cream blazer spotless, a basket of pastel cupcakes balanced in one hand and a bouquet of lilies in the other. Behind her was a man with a camera and a name tag clipped to his shirt. Savannah Family Living. "I'm here to see Mrs. Harrington," Vera chirped to the front desk. "We're celebrating a new arrival. A legacy." Legacy. That word again. I froze halfway through the corridor as she swept past me, the photographer following obediently, like this was some staged political event. I followed silently, standing just outside the door as Vera walked into the hospital room and began arranging cupcakes and flowers without even glancing at Isolde. "Darling," she said, lifting a cupcake with a flourish. "We thought these would add some cheer. I also invited Mark. He's doing a local profile on Southern matriarchs. Just a quick photo for the community piece." Isolde blinked slowly from the bed, barely upright. She looked pale and emotionally threadbare. She didn't speak. She didn't object. She simply turned her face away from the camera light, which flickered on with a mechanical beep. I stepped in fully then, and Vera turned to me with a smile so polished I could see my own reflection in her lipstick. "This is my younger niece," she said brightly to the photographer, waving toward me without a glance. "She stopped by, sweet thing." I felt my stomach twist. Niece. "Actually," I said, staring directly at the man with the camera, "I'm her sister." The photographer hesitated for a moment, clearly sensing the tension. Vera turned her head slightly, her smile tightening. "Oh, of course," she said smoothly. "I misspoke." Before I could say anything more, the door opened again, and in walked Dorian. He looked well-rested, clean-shaven, the kind of casually polished that suggested he'd had a long shower and zero guilt. His blazer was unwrinkled, his phone still in hand. "Sorry," he said breezily. "Got caught up with delays at the airport. Did I miss anything important?" I stared at him. He had missed the birth of his own child, left his wife in active labor without even checking his phone, and all he could say was that Isolde's fingers dug into the hospital blanket, but she said nothing. I watched her, and a part of me broke again, not because she was silent, but because I knew she felt she had no other choice. Dorian walked over to the bed and kissed Isolde on the forehead. "Glad everything went well. Mom's got it all set up for the family announcement." And just like that, he posed next to Vera, one hand on her shoulder, the other resting on the hospital rail as the camera clicked. I didn't say a word. Not there, not then. But I was already boiling. The moment the photographer packed up and Vera left to take a few calls, I made an excuse and headed out. I needed space, air, clarity. I drove toward my parents' house without planning to. It just happened. The car practically turned itself down their street. Dad was in his usual chair, reading the newspaper with one foot propped on the coffee table. Mom was rearranging the silverware drawer, for the third time that week, probably. They looked up as I walked in, no trace of surprise on their faces. "Morning," I said. "You look tired," Mom said. "I am." I sat across from them and didn't waste time. "She gave birth alone." Dad blinked. "What?" "Isolde. She was alone. No Dorian. No Vera. No one. She was in labor when I arrived, and I had to drive her to the hospital." Mom frowned. "But she wasn't due yet, right?" "That doesn't matter." Dad sighed, folding his paper carefully. "Lexi, I know you mean well, but that's their marriage. You can't just insert yourself like this." "Insert myself?" "She was abandoned." "You don't know the whole story," Mom added gently. "Maybe he didn't mean to. Maybe it was a misunderstanding." I stood. "Do you two even hear yourselves?" They exchanged a look. A familiar one. The look they gave each other when they wanted me to quiet down. "She's not saying anything," Dad said. "And that tells me this isn't as serious as you think it is." I turned away. I couldn't even breathe properly in that room. Everything felt too neat, too rehearsed. "I can't believe you," I said, my voice tight. "You always told me family meant showing up, but when it's inconvenient, suddenly silence is more acceptable." I didn't wait for an answer. Back in my car, hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel, I opened my phone's recorder and began talking. Not to them, not to Vera, not even to Dorian, to the future. I spoke plainly, about everything I'd seen, what I'd read, what I suspected, what I'd felt watching Isolde crumble under the weight of a legacy she never asked for. I talked until my voice cracked. I ended with a sentence that didn't sound like me, but maybe it should have. "If something happens to me," I said softly, "this story won't be buried." As I pulled back into the hospital parking lot, I sat there for a few minutes, watching the world move outside my windshield. Families with balloons, grandparents in cardigans, joyful fathers holding up car seats like trophies. And then, a buzz. I checked my phone. Vera had posted a photo from earlier that day. Isolde's eyes half open, Dorian's hand resting on the crib, Vera beaming at the camera. The caption? Blessed beyond words. The birth of legacy. I didn't reply to Vera's post, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew anything I wrote in that moment would be louder than I intended, and she'd twist it. That's what she was good at, spinning the silence of others into her own version of the truth. Instead, I sat beside Isolde, scrolling through the comments beneath the photo. A cascade of heart emojis. Beautiful family. 3 generations of strength. This is what legacy looks like. Legacy, it was a word they wielded like armor, but I knew better now. Isolde stirred, holding the baby with both arms, her face bathed in the soft light leaking through the window. Her thumb scrolled across her screen as well, her expression slowly collapsing. I didn't even know they took that picture, she said quietly. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped tight. They want the image, I said, not you. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than her voice ever could. A few minutes passed. The baby whimpered, and Isolde reached for her phone charger, which she couldn't find. I offered to check her bag. She nodded, a grateful smile barely there. The charger was tangled in the side pouch, half wrapped around a bottle of lotion. But when I turned her phone on and unlocked it to plug it in, something popped up on the screen. An audio memo, unplayed. Labeled, for Lexi, if I don't make it. I froze. Isolde saw the screen. Her face tightened. You weren't supposed to see that. I didn't hit play. I waited. She sighed, long and shaky. I recorded it a few days ago. I don't know. Something felt wrong. I was afraid I wouldn't get the chance to say anything if things went bad. I didn't say a word. She nodded, giving me permission. I tapped the memo. Her voice filled the room, low and steady. If you're hearing this, I guess I wasn't strong enough to stop them. But maybe you can be. Maybe someone needs to finally say it out loud, that this family doesn't care about love. They care about optics. About control. I kept waiting for someone to show up for me, but they only ever show up for the camera. Lexi, don't let them raise my child the way they raised me. If I'm gone, let her grow up knowing the truth, not the script. The audio ended. Neither of us moved. I thought maybe Dorian would change, she whispered. Maybe once the baby was here, maybe he'd be proud to be a father, finally grow up. But it's all about the photo, always has been. I swallowed hard. My hands were trembling, but I kept them on my lap. You're not gone, I said. And you're not alone. The door creaked open just then. I tensed, expecting Vera, or worse, Dorian. But it was Edith. She held a small blanket in her hands, hand-stitched with soft yellow thread. A quilted patchwork design, frayed a bit at the edges. I thought the baby might like something homemade, she said gently. Isolde smiled weakly. Thank you, Edith. I motioned for her to stay. Do you have a minute? She stepped inside and sat on the edge of the window bench. 2 weeks ago, she began without prompting, your sister fainted in the kitchen. I heard the thud and ran in. She'd hit her head on the lower cabinet door. I called Vera immediately. And? I asked. She told me not to call an ambulance. Said Isolde was delicate, and that she just needed rest and a cup of tea. I stared at her. You didn't take her in? I wanted to, Edith said, her voice cracking. But I didn't have the authority. Vera made it clear. I thought maybe I was overreacting. But then, when I heard you were here at the hospital, I knew it had gone too far. I glanced at Isolde, who was staring out the window. Why are you telling me now? I asked. Edith folded the little quilt into her lap. Because someone finally is willing to listen. I nodded slowly. Well, I hear you. And thank you. Really? She stood, touched Isolde's shoulder gently, and slipped out without another word. Isolde was still looking outside. She always looked out for me, she murmured. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the Notes app, scrolling past a draft of a client invoice, a grocery list, and finally, the email I had been drafting silently in my mind all night. A family law attorney in Savannah, recommended by a friend from college. I didn't know much about custody law, but I didn't need to. Not yet. I only needed to ask the right question. I typed it plainly, no flourish. I believe my sister has been financially manipulated. She may need help exiting safely. I'm not sure how this works, but I'm ready. I read it over once, then hit send. The room was quiet. Isolde was rocking her daughter softly, humming something so low it barely registered. I pulled the yellow quilt from the end of the bed and draped it over the bassinet. The baby didn't stir. I leaned down close and whispered, "Your mom asked me to protect you. I will, even if it means going to war." I didn't flinch when I read the message. "You think this is over? You don't know who you're messing with." It was from an unlisted account. No profile photo, no name, just a shadow lobbing warnings through the dark. I didn't show it to Isolde. Not yet. I needed time to process what the threat really meant. Was it just posturing? Or was this someone, Vera, Dorian, or one of their many enablers, signaling that they were ready to play hardball? Either way, I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early. The halls were quieter than usual, as if the building itself was exhaling after 2 long days of tension. I brought coffee for the nurses and a paper bag of lemon muffins for Isolde, though I knew she probably wouldn't eat. She was awake, eyes heavy, baby cradled in her lap. She offered a tired smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "She didn't sleep much," she said, nodding toward the bassinet. "You either," I replied, placing the bag on her tray. Just then, Vera arrived. Not with flowers this time, but with a silver-rimmed frame in one hand and a stack of glossy cards in the other. She didn't even knock. Just swept into the room like she belonged there, chin lifted, perfume trailing behind her. "Good morning," she announced, voice sweet as frosting. "I thought we could finalize the announcement today." She handed me the framed print. Inside, beneath gold calligraphy, were the words, "With joy and grace, the Harrington family welcomes the next heir to the legacy." I stared at it for a beat longer than I should have. She smiled wider. "We're hoping to include it in the Savannah Family Women's Circle Bulletin, a lovely Sunday feature." I looked up at her slowly. "You want me to post this?" "Of course." "You have such a natural touch with social media. Tag the right people. Hashtags. You know." "She almost gave birth alone," I said evenly, the words slicing through the air between us. Vera blinked but didn't lose her poise. "But she didn't, and now everyone looks like they did the right thing. Isn't that what matters?" Isolde turned away. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. I stood. "You will not post this. You will not tag me, and if you try, I will post something of my own. And unlike you, I won't need a publicist to make it sound believable." Vera tilted her head slightly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Are you threatening me, dear?" "No," I said. "I'm promising you." She held my gaze for a second longer, then turned toward Isolde. "Well, let me know if you need anything," she said lightly, as if nothing had just happened. Then she walked out, her heels clicking against the tile. The moment she was gone, the tension in the room dropped like a stone in water. Isolde let out a breath. Her shoulders slumped. I sat back down beside her. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "You don't have to be." She looked at me for a long moment, then finally said, "You shouldn't have to defend me. I should have done it long ago." "Then do it now." She didn't reply, but something in her expression shifted. A flicker of something I hadn't seen since before she married Dorian. Not anger, not sadness, conviction. Odette, who had been quietly coloring on the floor beside the window, suddenly spoke. "Grandma says Mommy's too much drama." The room went still. Isolde closed her eyes. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I knelt beside Odette and touched her hand gently. "Sometimes grown-ups say things that aren't true," I said softly. She nodded like she understood, even if she didn't. Later that afternoon, I took a walk outside. The hospital courtyard was cool and empty, a light breeze brushing the trees. I needed space to breathe. When I checked Instagram out of habit, I noticed Vera's post had vanished. Deleted. I let out a dry laugh. It wasn't victory, but it was movement. The kind of movement people like Vera didn't make unless they were rattled. But just as I turned back toward the building, my phone buzzed again. A new message. Private. Anonymous. "You think this is over? You don't know who you're messing with." I didn't respond to the message right away. I just stared at it. The words burned into the center of my screen like someone had carved them into glass. "You think this is over? You don't know who you're messing with." Not even a name, no photo, just a blank profile and a gut punch of a sentence. And then, another. "Your sister's a mess. You're next." And one more. 30 seconds later. "We know where you work. You should be more careful what you say." It was the kind of thing you'd expect from a bad movie. But there was nothing theatrical about the way my hands trembled as I screenshot each message, attached them to an email, and sent them directly to the family lawyer I'd contacted 2 days ago. His reply came quickly. "This meets the threshold for digital harassment. I've filed a preservation request with the platform. Don't delete anything." I dropped my phone onto the couch and exhaled. The apartment was quiet, dim. A single lamp lit the corner near my desk, where baby supplies had started collecting. Diapers, wipes, a spare car seat. Not because I had a baby, but because, in a matter of days, my life had become something much bigger than my own. I walked over to the window, stared down at the empty street. I could almost see the weight of that message bleeding through the screen and into the night. Fear had a way of creeping into your bones without you realizing it. But this time, I didn't let it settle. Instead, I opened Instagram. I didn't post a name. I didn't have to. I typed slowly, deliberately. When women give birth alone while their family poses for PR, what exactly are we celebrating? I didn't use hashtags, didn't tag anyone. I just hit share. Within minutes, the post started gaining attention. Comments, DMs, shares. Women I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me. This happened to my sister. I delivered in the hallway while my husband FaceTimed from Cancun. I've never said this out loud before, but thank you. I sat in that moment, quiet but buzzing, as my phone lit up again and again. And then it happened. Someone commented, "Harrington family, right? This smells like Vera." I didn't say a word, but the comment didn't disappear. Neither did the others that followed. That's when I saw it. Vera's official account, verified, pristine, commenting beneath the original post. "Please respect privacy during this sacred time." Sacred, that word. I stared at the comment like it was a bad joke. I read it twice, then typed my reply without blinking. "Respect is earned through presence, not press releases." It hung there, quiet and cutting. A single sentence that said everything. It didn't take long for the screenshots to spread. Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, every mom's group within 50 miles. Even a few Southern etiquette circles started whispering. And when Southern socialites whisper, things move faster than wildfire in July. Someone messaged me directly. "I always knew something was off with that family. Keep going." I stared at the screen, a strange tightness in my chest. Not anxiety, not pride, something heavier. Dorian tried calling me next. I let it ring. Then he texted, "You need to stop before this gets worse." I stared at the words, a tired laugh catching in my throat. After everything, after leaving Isolde alone to give birth, after staging family photos like a politician, he had the nerve to act like I was the one causing harm. I replied simply, "It's already worse. You just didn't notice until people started watching." I turned my phone over on the table and leaned back in my chair. The baby's soft coos drifted through the baby monitor I'd borrowed from the hospital. Isolde was finally sleeping, curled on my pull-out couch, Odette tucked safely beside her. I should have felt relieved, but I didn't, because the next moment would come, the retaliation. I knew Vera, knew how she worked. She didn't shout, she didn't punch, she filed lawsuits, whispered lies, branded people difficult with a smile, and I was now in her crosshairs. That night, just before midnight, my phone rang again. This time, it was a new number, local. I debated answering, let it ring halfway through before finally picking up. Lexi Walker? A calm voice asked. Speaking. My name's Monica Ellis. I'm a journalist with the Savannah Gazette. I've been following the story that seems to be unfolding online. I'd like to talk to you about your experience, off the record. For now. I didn't speak right away. I watched the streetlights outside flicker against the brick walls. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. I'm listening, I said finally, but I'm not ready to be a headline. Understood, Monica replied. This isn't about headlines, it's about truth and patterns. You're not the first woman I've spoken to about that family. That stopped me. Not the first. You want to meet? I asked. Tomorrow? Coffee? My treat. I glanced at Isolde, asleep and unaware. All right, I said. But if I'm walking into a setup, you won't be, she said quickly. Trust me, you're not alone in this. For the first time in days, I felt something shift. Not hope. Not yet. But traction. We didn't say another word until we reached the car. Isolde eased herself into the passenger seat, moving slowly but with a quiet determination I hadn't seen in her in years. I buckled Odette into the back, tucked the baby quilt around her, and climbed behind the wheel. As I pulled out of the hospital parking garage, a reporter with a notepad stepped forward, eyes full of hopeful curiosity. Isolde didn't even look at her, just murmured, "Can we go home now?" I kept my eyes on the road, hands steady at 10 and 2. Ours or yours? She stared ahead, then said it clearly, no tremor in her voice. Whichever one has fewer ghosts. We drove in silence for a few blocks. The city looked normal, shopkeepers sweeping storefronts, joggers pacing past coffee carts, but my pulse was anything but calm. I had agreed to meet Monica Ellis, the journalist from the Savannah Gazette, at a quiet cafe off Habersham Street. She'd promised off the record, but I knew how things worked. Once the truth cracked open, it didn't reseal. We parked around the back. I left Isolde and the baby at my apartment upstairs, gave her the key, and headed across the street. Monica was already there, sipping black coffee, a leather-bound notebook open on the table. She stood when she saw me. Lexi, she greeted. Thank you for coming. I nodded and sat across from her. She didn't pull out a recorder. No laptop, just the notebook, a pen, and that kind of sharp gaze journalists are born with. I'm not ready to be quoted, I said. You won't be, she replied. Not unless you want to be. But I think you know this story is bigger than one photo op. I told her everything. The hospital, the fake announcement, the cupcakes, the burner messages, the envelope in Isolde's bag. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Monica scribbled a few notes, then looked up. Even if this doesn't make print, she said, the internet already knows. But if it does, it'll be the story that shifts what we accept from good families. Her words lingered, because that's what Vera and her kind had built, a good family brand, a legacy rooted in curated charity events, carefully posed social media posts, and layered manipulation no one dared question. Until now. That afternoon, the hospital arranged a small reception in one of their donated rooms. Vera, of course, had arranged it herself. There were hors d'oeuvres, gold-trimmed paper programs, even a local videographer filming B-roll of the celebration to be used later for the Women's Health Initiative campaign. Isolde looked pale but composed as they wheeled her into the room. Dorian stood by the doorway, checking his watch. Vera chatted with board members like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't left her daughter-in-law to deliver alone while sipping wine at a vineyard. I leaned in close to Isolde and whispered, "You don't have to let this happen." She nodded once, just barely. When they called her forward to present the honorary plaque, She stood slowly. Vera offered her arm, but Isolde didn't take it. She walked to the front of the room, cradling her newborn in one arm. There was no trembling in her voice when she spoke. "I want to thank the hospital staff," she began, looking directly at the nurses and midwives near the back. "You were here for me when others weren't." There was a pause. The room, once humming with polite conversation, quieted. "There's no legacy without showing up," she continued. "This baby, my daughter, is not your redemption story. She is not here to fix your public image. She is not a prop. And I will not let her be raised under a banner of lies." Vera froze, mouth half open. Dorian stepped forward, but Isolde's stare stopped him cold. A nurse near the corner, someone I didn't recognize, quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. Isolde turned and walked out. No one applauded. No one moved. I followed her, heart pounding with something more than adrenaline. It was justice, and it was long overdue. By that evening, the video had gone viral. It wasn't even posted by us. Someone, maybe that nurse, uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Woman speaks truth at hospital donor event." It was picked up within hours, then reposted on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit. By the time we got home, we had over 20 missed calls. Vera's Instagram was locked down. Her PR firm announced they had parted ways over values misalignment. A major donor pulled out from the Women's Health Circle. The official statement from the group said, "We are reevaluating our standards of leadership and transparency." I didn't rejoice, not outwardly, but when Dorian posted a smug, vaguely apologetic message, "No family is perfect, but we all try. Let's leave space for grace." I couldn't help myself. I reposted it with one sentence. "Grace comes after accountability." No hashtags, no mentions. It was the digital version of a mic drop. Later that night, Isolde sat on the couch with the baby asleep in her lap. The light from the television flickered across her face. She looked different. Not new, but free. "I can't believe I said all that," she whispered. "I can," I replied. She gave me a small smile. "What if they come after us again?" "They already did," I said. "And you walked right through it." She turned to me. "You think it's over?" I looked at her, really looked. Then I glanced down at Odette, dreaming peacefully between us. "No," I said. "But I think we finally get to decide what comes next." The drive home that day felt like exhaling after holding my breath for weeks. Isolde sat in the passenger seat, arms around Odette in her carrier, and I could feel the weight sliding off her shoulders mile by mile. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. The silence was no longer heavy, it was restful. 2 weeks passed, just enough time for things to settle, but not enough to forget. Isolde stayed in the apartment with me, and somehow, it worked. We took turns feeding Odette, cleaning bottles, folding laundry. There was no grand division of duties, just a quiet understanding. She cooked when she had energy. I paid the bills while she napped with the baby on her chest. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Some mornings, I'd catch her freezing mid-task. A certain ringtone, a whiff of perfume from a onesie Vera had gifted. Her eyes would cloud, and her hands would shake just slightly. "I still feel like I have to ask permission for every breath," she admitted one night, her voice thin as the steam rising from her tea. "You don't," I said. "Not here." She smiled then, a small, tired smile, but this one reached her eyes. The legal process had already started. Our lawyer, Eric, was thorough and quiet. He didn't ask Isolde to retell everything. He simply said, "I believe you," and handled the details. One morning, he called and confirmed Dorian had signed over the house. No contest. "I kept thinking he'd fight," Isolde said when I relayed the news. "But I think Vera lost the stomach to keep puppeting him." It sounded cold, but we both knew it was true. Vera had vanished from public view. No new posts, no charity events, no letters to the editor. The Savannah Women's Health Circle had released a statement 2 days prior. "We are reevaluating how we define legacy. We stand with mothers who were left unseen." It was worded diplomatically, but the message was clear. Vera was no longer on the board. One afternoon, while checking the mailbox, I found a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was an old photo, me and Isolde, maybe ages 6 and 10, in matching dresses at some family function. The photo had been torn in half and taped back together, right through our faces, written in neat cursive across the back. Some things can't be fixed, but they can still be carried. No signature, no context. I knew it wasn't from Dorian. It didn't feel like his style. Vera, maybe, or someone in the shadows of that family. I didn't show it to Isolde. I didn't throw it away either. I placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath our attorney's business card, and a copy of the notarized custody filing. Life wasn't back to normal. It was something new. One morning, Odette toddled across the living room floor with a toy phone in her hand. She held it up to her ear and shouted, "Auntie Mom, come talk!" Isolde and I locked eyes and laughed until our stomachs hurt. It wasn't wrong, just unexpected. Later that week, we visited a 2-bedroom unit across town. Nothing fancy, but it had a little backyard and sunlight that spilled across the kitchen tile in the afternoon. The landlord handed Isolde the lease. For the first time in years, she signed her name without asking anyone's opinion. "I forgot what this feels like," she whispered, holding the pen a little tighter than needed. I helped her move in, a slow process, one box at a time. Most of what she owned had been left behind or boxed up by others, but what she took with her this time, her child, her courage, her name on the lease, was worth more than all the wedding crystals she never asked for. Standing in the doorway of her new home, I handed her a housewarming gift, a simple wooden frame with a quote I'd printed myself. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation of story, of voice, of silence broken. She read it, then looked up and said, "I'm going to hang that above Odette's crib." We didn't hug, we didn't cry, we didn't need to. When she stepped across the threshold with the baby on her hip, she turned back for just a second. Her voice was steady, her eyes clear. "I don't think I believe in perfect endings," she said. I smiled, standing just outside her new beginning. "But I believe in this. Some stories don't end with fireworks or courtroom slams. Sometimes, justice looks like a mother signing her own lease, or a sister refusing to disappear." What happened to Isolde wasn't just about abandonment, it was about erasure. And what I did wasn't heroic. It was what any of us should do when someone we love is quietly being erased. So here's my question to you. Have you ever stayed silent when you knew you should have spoken up? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe stories like this matter, real, raw, and honest, hit subscribe. There's more to come.